Welcome to Cracked, the podcast, the program that slays the dragons of mental health by stripping away the shame, embarrassment, fear, and stigma. Because mental health isn't something that affects just some of us, it applies to all of us. Here to shine a new light on areas of mental health that often go unvisited are your hosts, Rebecca Schaper and Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello, and welcome to Crack the Podcast, Slaying the Dragons of Mental Health, with me, Sandie Sedgbeer.
And me, Rebecca Schaper.
And with stress, depression, anxiety, and fear fast becoming a major global problem, more and more people are turning to medical marijuana to help lift their low moods, calm their anxieties, and ease their physical, mental, and emotional pain. But how effective is marijuana really? What evidence do we have? And perhaps more importantly, how safe is it? Few topics are as hotly debated as this one. So with us this week to unravel some of the myths and misconceptions about cannabis in general, and the question of medical marijuana being a safer alternative to opiates and NSAIDs in treating PTS, depression, anxiety, addiction, mental health issues, and pain, are two experts in the field, Dr. Rasean Hodge and Nick Mccauley. Dr. Hodge received his BA in psychology from Morehouse College and earned his medical degree cum laude from the Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. He's led several hospice programs throughout Georgia as both medical director and assistant medical director, and currently serves as medical director for Premier Chronic Pain Care in Atlanta, Georgia. He's also an advocate for the legalization and cultivation of medical cannabis. Dr. Hodge was a contributory factor in writing the law for HB 722 and its inclusiveness of peripheral neuropathy as being one of the qualifying conditions for participation in the state's medicinal cannabis program. And also with us is Nick Mccauley, who's an entrepreneur and an expert on marijuana. And Dr. Hodge is on video, but owing to technical issues, Nick is... you can hear Nick, but you can't see him. Anyway, Dr. Rasean Hodge, Nick Mccauley, welcome.
Thank you for having us on the show. Appreciate you. And thank you for that beautiful introduction.
We just really appreciate y'all coming on the show and talking about this. So my opening question to both of y'all is we'd like to start having both of you tell a little bit about your background and why both of you got into the cannabis field. And Rasean, do you mind going first?
Hey, no problem. I'm family medicine trained by background. I'm 20 years in. I've done clinical trials, clinical research, phase 3 clinical studies for the FDA. So I understand how when drugs come to market, I understand the preparation of that process from a phase 1 to a phase 2 to clinical trials. I've been on the front line for diabetes, hypertension, most of my professional career. I also ventured into hospice, and that's when I kind of fell in love with pain. I felt like my biggest asset as a physician was my personality and my empathy. So I really felt my calling was deaf and dying. The last 6 months of life, I've got just as much as the patients and the family got from the therapy, with my own dealing with life, dealing with reality, and helping with acceptance of mostly everything I learned through hospice. And then cannabis started rolling around, cannabis, in 2011, I think there was like 27 medicinal cannabis states that had this medical cannabis law. And I've always been curious about cannabis. I've seen cannabis my whole professional career in urine drug screens. Never had any experience of it, but I saw the effects of alcohol time and time again in my clinic. Benzos, that's the Xanax, the Ambien, the Valium. And of course, this opioid epidemic we've been in the last decade. You see those effects, how it just, it just crumbles your family, the addiction, the adverse events, So I started to get really curious, like, hey, this is this new industry. And cut me off if I get too long-winded, please stop.
No, go for it.
So, as a physician, when you're 2 decades in, you kind of have this ethical knock that gets louder and louder as you understand the $1 trillion healthcare system in this country. And it starts to make you sick. It starts to really make you sick. Because, in medical school, to pass these exams, to get this MD, these 2 letters, you'll learn a disease, and then you'll learn a gold standard of treatment. Okay, and so when you get out, you practice this gold standard of treatment. So say if it's an upper respiratory tract infection, since everyone's familiar with a URI, everyone had a cough and cold. So they say, hey, the gold treatment is Zithromax, a Z-Pack. And you don't understand the millions of dollars that this pharmaceutical company that owns a Z-Pack, what they put in. And then you kind of understand, like, hey, most physicians are just salesmen and saleswomen, and once you understand clinical trials and who signs up for it, and let me ask you a question. How many Black physicians have you interviewed?
You're our first one, and I'm so glad you're on board.
Okay. How many Black physicians in cannabis have you interviewed?
You're the first one.
You're the first one.
So you understand the sickness.
Yep.
You understand me. Now you understand why I had no choice to get into cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
Because you get to a point where you understand medicine, and you get to a point where you can't make any more excuses for the sickness in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just out of it, and you're like, here's this new career, here's this new industry that's booming, and I'm your first Black physician. Now, Black physicians only make up 2% of the physicians in this country are Black that look like me. I'm your first Black cannabis doctor you're interviewing. Blacks are less than 1.5% of this $100 billion industry. So if you were me, you would use every credential you have to make a difference, to open the door, because everyone knows that people that look like me in every major city were arrested 8 to 1, 10 to 1. And Black and whites are the same. We consume cannabis at the same rate. I've been practicing medicine for 20 years. Why are Black males dying at 65, 67, and white males are dying at 74? Why are we 2021? Why do we still have these healthcare disparities? Why do we still have Black mothers dying on the table and Black infants dying at a rate of 60% than white infants? The sickness starts to get to you.
Yeah.
Most physicians around 50 are ready to retire, unless you do something bad and you can't retire because you're sued, right? So because of this sickness, I had to do something. And then coincidentally, I ended up breaking my neck in 2012. I ran into a guy's chest playing basketball, just recreational, and I fractured my C4, C5, denting my spinal cord, thank God, because I would have been paralyzed, So I had to have an emergency fusion, and then 3 or 4 years later, I had to have a corpectomy. So I went from, I have to do something, because if I don't fight for equity, this cannabis industry will be built and there will be no Black ownership. And just like most sectors, you'll look at Black people just to be managers.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. That's the sad truth. I've seen it in every sector. So then I break my neck, and I went from prescribing Roxys and Ambiens and muscle relaxers to being a patient just like that. And I know all the effects of opioids. I know that. I prescribe them. I know the effects of benzos. Yeah, but when you don't consider yourself, hey, man, you might one day the light can turn and you'll be on those medications that you used to prescribe, and you're going to deal with the constipation, the addiction, the liver enzymes elevated, the depression. You're going to be that. So I was that. And when you have nerve pain, and that's why you you mentioned that I helped right peripheral neuropathy because I was living in a state that eventually, we had cannabis laws, but I was still a criminal. We had 8 diseases. Chronic pain wasn't on the list. It ranged from sickle cell to cancer to of course, the seizure, of course, ALS, epilepsy. But it didn't have chronic pain. It didn't have any depression, and it didn't have any peripheral neuropathy. And peripheral neuropathy, for those that don't understand, that's pain that radiates. It's kind of like sciatica. So I had my fracture was C4, C5. I dented my cord. So my fingers and hands are always on fire like diabetics, like their feet. You get this lightning. It's terrible. Opioids didn't help. I became depressed. I had insomnia, lost a lot of weight, developed body dysmorphic syndrome because I couldn't work out. Became severely depressed, found cannabis, started using cannabis. And from then on, I was able to, it took me 6 months to get off the benzos because of the severe withdrawals. And then I was able to get off the opioids using cannabis. And I'm talking all delivery methods I had to explore, from edibles to inhalation, vapes, concentrates. I tried patches. I even used suppositories. So I got this knowledge. And then by 2015, I said, hey, let me be one of the physicians to start signing up Georgians, other people, because this is truly medicine. This is really an exit drug to get people off opioids and benzos. And how do I know? It's empirical evidence.
Yeah.
The original doctors, the original doctor that discovered diabetes, he put his finger in the pee and tasted it and said, this is sweet. Something's going on with this urine.
Yep.
I'm in a space where I can tell people the truth for once. You go see your oncologist. That oncologist never took the chemo. But he's going to say, hey, you take this chemo. He don't know the journey. He doesn't know the side effects. He doesn't know the adverse events. He knows that 4 out of 10 people won't ever ring that bell because they can't even stay compliant with the medication. It burns you. It hurts you. It numbs you out that bad. They can't even finish the regimen.
Yes. You're the whole package. I mean, you've been from one extreme to another. And do you think that basketball accident was like the catalyst of where you are today?
Yeah, it's the way I survived it to right my wrongs.
Yeah.
I was given mercy because I had to deal with not a survival guilt, but like, why me? Most people fracture their C4. And if I show you my MRI, it got squished. The disc exploded and squished it. Any little tear, I'd have been paralyzed. It don't have to be a complete cut. So it was my time to be solid. Let me do something right. This is my legacy. Yeah, I'm only 2% of physicians in this country, but guess what? My sister's a surgeon, So in my family, we've been there, done that. All right, what's next?
But Rasean,
it's
not just your legacy, it was your oath. And how many times do we meet physicians who've taken the same oath?
To do no harm.
Yeah.
The practice off empirical evidence. Yeah. It's all BS, but I'm doing it right now. And I'm doing it right. And I was willing to be a villain. I was willing to be a hero, whatever came with it, because I didn't want anyone to feel as lonely mentally and physically as I did, ever, So let me do it right. Let me use my voice.
And you are.
And thank goodness you are. Yeah. Nick, we can't see you. We can hear you. How about you? How did you get into this arena? What motivated you?
So, I apologize. You guys can't see me. Sorry for the technical difficulties over here. I'm still trying to figure this out. But, my way, how I got into cannabis was a little bit different. I came from a background where, my father was a veteran and he suffered from addiction, so I started using cannabis at the age of 13, on up. And then I got to where, you know, I was put on some conditions by the state that led me where I couldn't use cannabis, you know, so I had to find my way out of all that and child support and stuff like that. But back in like 2010, I had a really good friend of mine whose father was dying from cancer. You know, I had always been around cannabis. I had used it, but his father was using it for a medicinal purpose, you know, and that was something that was new to us. And the type of oil that we would fly up to Colorado and get was referred to as RSO oil or FICO oil. And this type of medicinal oil was available for medicinal only patients. And especially for cancer patients, it showed that some studies showed that it would shrink cancerous tumors. It could rid the body of disease. It helped with chronic pain. So we started bringing that oil back to his father, and I would see how it would help give him an appetite. It would help relax him. You know, it helped him out a lot. And that same type of oil, you know, is what I started using with cannabis patients and even my own father and other patients who are suffering from chemical dependency and addiction, you know. So it was just a really powerful cannabis oil that we were using. And that just, you know, spiraled from that. And then CBD came along in the Farm Bill. And then, you know, I linked with Dr. Hodge in 2014. And, you know, we started trying to help all the patients who met the criteria for Georgia for the low THC program. And, you know, just here we are today, 2021. You know, it's been a crazy journey, but it's very interesting what's coming in the future for cannabis.
Mm. Rasean, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask. There are so many myths and misconceptions about cannabis. You know, what do we need to know? I mean, Rebecca and I both have lots of questions, but ultimately, it all boils down to what do we need to know, doesn't it?
Oh,
Rebecca?
you need to. You need to understand. One, that, you know, that there's drugs everywhere, right? We need to understand that we all have a natural endocannabinoid system, which is named after the plant cannabis. And we have to hammer the point that this is not going to be a medicinal sector that we can sell that one size fits all. That weight doesn't matter, that sex doesn't matter, that what you ingested before doesn't matter. You know, they tried to wrap this medical world up that one pill is the same, it's going to work the same for me and you. And you know, it's different. If I write you an antibiotic, do I need to take diflucan? Will I get a yeast infection? But a woman, if I write them an antibiotic, they have a possibility to develop an adverse event, a side effect, a yeast infection. So yeah. You have to understand when you go to this bud tender, to this dispensary, that, hey, he or she might not know what they're talking about. So you have to do your own homework, because this industry is starting. There's dispensaries, which are pharmacies, but because it's still a Schedule I drug, we call them dispensaries, because doctors can only recommend, we can't prescribe, because it's a Schedule I drug, which is going to change hopefully before the end of the year. So you need to know that. So we know, hey, if I recommend a cannabis ratio 1-to-1, I'm going to tell you what to look out for, the adverse events, the side effects, and everyone is different, how to titrate, how to wean off your other medications. You need to know that, hey, just like a drug or just like anything you put in your body, your liver has to break it down. I don't care if it's a cup of coffee. I don't care if it's a vitamin E or a vitamin C pill. So there are drug-to-drug interactions.
Yep.
We need to understand there's the good, there's a bad, and there's an ugly of cannabis. We need to understand the current trends. You know, a lot of these current trends are very non-medicinal, you know, very high THC with very low CBD. That's the new trend. But moving forward, is going to be a lot of high THC and a lot of high CBD. Those are going to be medicinal. The fiber, which is high CBD and very low THC, is going to increase as well, because we understand cannabis genomics. You need to understand that, hey, death will happen. How can we mitigate? How can we reduce morbidity using cannabis? What are the important studies? What's going on with Alzheimer's? What's going on with the big four that takes us out? Heart disease, lung disease. Start doing more trials. Those that pay attention to those. And then, with this pandemic, the edible world, the CBD world has exploded this last year. So there's going to be so many millions of more users, but we don't want that poison center line to be calling, right?
Yep.
Because they're going to say, hey, in this state that went medical, all the line from poison center is jumping off the hook. No, it's just obviously with legal access, there's going to be way more users. So that phone call is the same ratio. Don't let the news fool you. With more access, there's going to be more exposure. So we don't want that phone to ring at all. So with proper education, we'll let people know, hey, you have heart disease. Cannabis can cause vasospasms. So you know what? It can cause a heart attack. It can cause angina. It can cause like you feel like your heart's beating out of your chest. Those are vasospasms. It can cause vasospasms in your brain. It can happen. It can cause psychosis. It can happen. So that line is not ringing off the hook. Kids aren't ingesting your medication, those edibles that are meant for you by mistake, with proper education. And this sector will just soar. And I believe cannabis can be the great alleviator, the great exit drug, especially the acids, CBDA and THCA. Those are going to be the next opioids. I'm talking for acute pain, like you just came out of surgery and you're open from here to here. We're going to use some type of cannabinoid formulation with a teeny bit of an opioid. The studies are amazing what's happening. So even if you're new to this, you have to know there's a chance before you have your final sleep, before you close your eyes, that you died with a cannabis formulation in you, whether it be off the street or it was with big Pfizer or Novartis or Jazz Pharmaceuticals, the one that just bought, Altria. You understand what I'm saying? So it's a lot to know, a lot to get. We don't want you going to gas stations. We want this field to be ethical. So I'll just keep talking. There's so much for you to.
Nick, is there anything you want to add to that question there?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Well, the question was, really, what do we want to know? Has Rasean covered it all?
No, I think he got it. He definitely,
Sorry, Nick.
No, I appreciate that, sir. Appreciate that, because Doc actually, he can speak to the actual science of it, and not just based off of theory. So it's he's definitely a wizard in everything he does.
Well, of course, when something is really making people a lot of money when you get the multi-level marketing companies on board. And here in England, and I don't know if it's true in America, but there are companies that are, selling cannabis to, it's probably just CBD, I imagine. I don't think they're allowed to sell anything else. But, where's the standardization? How can you know? How can you tell one from another?
Absolutely.
Somewhere there has to be some rules and regulations and management here.
No, absolutely. And that's one thing that we try to do is we try to set a standard with, the CBD products that we make available that set us aside from everybody else. Because you are right. In the US, a lot of people have the same CBD because there's only so many manufacturers. And with the science is always changing, so you got to stay out in front of, what's coming in the new products and the new, discoveries for CBD and cannabis. So it's one of those things where there's only so many manufacturers in the U.S., but so pretty much the same CBD shops have the same CBD. It's just a different label on the bottle, So that's one thing with Dr. Hodge that he does a good job in is he formulates and with what he's learning in college getting his degree in cannabis, you know, he knows about terpenes, he knows about the science, so he can formulate. And that's, you know, we can have products that work, because we don't want to just have one customer that we give a product to and we just make money off of them and they never come back again because the product we just gave them didn't work, you know? And that's the big issue, is you got so many people right now that know nothing about cannabis. They don't use it. They don't care to use it. They don't care about it. They don't care what it really does for people. They just want to make money. And that's a major issue.
And may I add?
Yes, sir. Please.
Nick, are you finished?
I'm finished, sir.
You sure? Okay. And just like you're saying, you're in Europe, right? You're in England, right? Now, you have a pharmaceutical cannabinoid formulation that's currently been prescribed for the last 3 years.
Only as medical, surely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's Sativex. You heard of GW Pharma?
Yes, I've heard of them. So
there's a branch over Europe, and there's across the pond over here. We have a drug that after Sativex, after you guys became your FDA approval, and Sativex, for those that don't understand, that's for pediatric seizures. Is a syndrome called Dravet syndrome.
Yeah.
So there's this pharmaceutical company in England called GW Pharma. They were able to successfully launch Sativex, which is 2.5 milligrams CBD and 2.5 milligrams THC, and it's a spray. So you talk about regulation. They've done it. Now they understand it's so much money in it, and they do this before the public really understands. You know,
but there's not. I mean, people can't go out and buy it. I mean, it's not available. People are still getting arrested for growing the plant here. Yeah. We have to take a short break now. But you know, this is a fascinating part of the conversation that, you know, we want to come back to.
International laws are low. You guys are a bit behind, but just having a approved drug is the seller, because they're gonna hey, this thing has been here for the last 3 or 4 years. Just because you didn't know about it, and they'll have the people that write law, they'll feel comfortable. You know,
we hope.
Yeah, and then by next year, you guys are green.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. But I see a lot of petitions going around of children who do need something, and they're not being prescribed it. You know, because it's very precise what they are allowing it for.
Very strict.
But we'll come back to this after the break. You're listening to Crack the Podcast with me, Sandie Sedgbeer, and my co-host, Rebecca Schaper. And we're talking today about the myths and misconceptions surrounding medical marijuana with cannabis experts, Dr. Rasean Hodge and Nick Mccauley. We'll be back with more after the break.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers, pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Worried about your friend but don't know how to reach out?
You can say how are you or get a fake tattoo. You can ask with an app if it works for you. You can chat with them in VR. It's so good. If you think you should check in, yeah, you should.
Whatever gets you talking. Reach out to a friend about their mental health. Learn how you can help at seizetheawkward.org.
Welcome back.
Rasean, I got a question to ask you. If I was a individual that came in to you as a client and I was dealing with anxiety, depression, addiction, what would you do to help me out?
Get a history. Have you tried any pharmaceuticals? How long have it, the duration? Were you able to be compliant with those antidepressants? Have you tried any anxiolytics? Any Valium, any Xanax, off the street or from a doctor like me? I need to know the truth. Have you ever used any type of cannabis formulation in the past? CBD, have you ever inhaled? Have you did a gummy? I got to get the truth. Are you doing any other polysubstance? Are you drinking, smoking? And then, what physicians miss is the support question. What's your support at home? I call it your village. Are you by yourself? Do you have a friend, a spouse? Of course, the major stressors you ask: depression, death of a spouse, any divorce. But then once you ascertain that, then you do the quick 6. How's your sleep? You tell me it's bad. What's your interest in stuff? You tell me I'm not interested. Any guilty feelings? Oh, I got a lot of guilt. What's your concentration? It's been crappy. Appetite, I can't eat. Or I'm emotional, I eat too much. Then, I make sure before, we get to go, any thoughts of hurting yourself? Have you had any previous suicide attempts? Talk to me, I need to know where we're at. And so once we're there, then I know you're ready to explore cannabis, because you might have failed pharmaceutical drugs. You failed acupuncture. Yeah, I tried to meditate. Yeah, I'm exercising and I still feel like crap. So then I'll start you with, hey, you mentioned, there's THC and there's CBD. CBD, obviously there's no THC in it, so it's non-psychoactive. CBD won't give you the complete entourage effect, which I would love for you, because cannabis is going to activate your ECS, your CB1 receptors if you have full spectrum, right? And it's also going to help with your serotonin receptors. And that's the main purpose why we write a Zoloft or antidepressant, is to increase dopamine, to increase serotonin. Hey, this cannabis product, this oil right here, or this joint right here will immediately, these are two, and I'll tell you, hey, you don't just got to smoke it, or there's oil, where it's very discreet. Edibles are very discreet. Vape is very discreet. This is more predictable, but you're gonna smell the terpenes from it. What's that smell? Those are terpenes. So I'll give you the education, and you say, hey, I don't want to have this psychoactivity. My aunt had a bad experience, my uncle, and he became addicted to drugs. Okay, here's CBD. CBD can just help you. Start at a dose of 25 milligrams. It's going to help you with your sleep. You said you had a problem with sleep. CBD, which is cannabidiol, will improve your sleep onset and your sleep duration. Thank you. That's a problem of mine. Okay. CBD will also, you said you have a problem with concentration. CBD will also help you with your focus. It can work like, have you heard of Ritalin or Adderall? And they're like, yeah, I heard of that. I got college friends that are on Adderall and adults that's still on Adderall. I was prescribed it as a kid. CBD is going to help with your focus. And I'll start you with a dose of 25 milligrams and then ask you to, after 3 days, to start titrating up. And I'll say, hey, this CBD can give you some stomach pain. It can cause some somnolence. Certain people that take CBD, their liver enzymes might go up. So in 3 months, I want you to come back and let's do a liver enzyme test to make sure there's no problems with your liver. And then before you leave, I'll help you start weaning off your antidepressants, because I don't want you to quit cold turkey, because medications change receptors in your brain. Mm-hmm. You just can't stop anything cold turkey.
Right.
You know? So that's will be my and I'll say, hey, CBD is a great anxiolytic, which is non-habit forming, non-addicting. I don't have to prescribe a Narcan with this. You know, I don't have to prescribe a benzodiazepine reversing agent with this, you know. So with that education and with that type of consultation, most caregivers and patients will fear, they say, hey, man, you know, I think this is okay for my teenage or for myself for depression, anxiety, and they're ready to sign up.
And I would think there would be a huge trust between you and the patient. It's got to be trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to be trust. It's doing whatever it takes to develop that autonomy. Because our main focus as caregivers, as physicians, is for you to be compliant for whatever we think is going to help you. Mm-hmm. So if you don't if I recommend cannabis oil and you're really big on things that taste bad, I did you a disservice. You won't stay compliant, you know? Right. So it's a lot of just, you know, experience. Use your ears. Yep. Shut up. That develops trust. Really just shut up. Let the patient, because the patient, he or she's at their last end. You know, most people think cannabis is the last option, but shows like this, we're going to say, hey, this should be your first choice, you know? So we're going to change the narrative. Trust, we're going to do that. But until then, people think this is the last option. They're stage 4 cancer, multiple suicide attempts, polysubstance abuse, livers are damn near gone, you know? Kidneys are, you know, they're a day away from dialysis. And they think this cannabis is going to save it all. You know, I'm like, whoa, you know, let's back up. So
well, what about, I mean, am I right in understanding that anyone can come to you as your patient? You know, Rebecca could come to you, I could come to you if I was in the States, and you could prescribe for us.
Yeah, we have 17 applicable diseases here in Georgia. In a recreational state, you have to be over 21. But in states that are medical only, you have to be a resident of that state. Initially, it was like you had to prove residence of 3-6 months, or you had to have a bona fide relationship with the doctor. And we're in a time where doctors, even if you have your bona fide relationship, you've been seeing your doctor since you was pediatrics, you know, the same family medicine doctor, but he has not yet mentioned cannabis to you, you know? So that relationship you have with your doctor is ridiculous, because only doctors that are ready to come out with this and talk about it, they're the ones we're the ones that are doing the work. You know, your physician still is going to say, hey, take this Valium for your anxiety. Be careful, put it in a locked box, you know. He might tell you that, but he or she's not going to tell you. After 3 days of taking a benzodiazepine, we talked about receptors, right? Your receptors change. It is not the patient's fault that they don't feel the relief anymore.
Yeah.
It's not their fault. This whole opioid epidemic is crap. It's not their fault. What happens, you know, when you take a medication or your drug, your body does something to it. Mm-hmm. And the drug does something to the body, and your body does something to the drug, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about mental health. You guys, you're expert ladies, so you know your receptors change. You understand tolerance. You understand abuse liability. We don't call it addiction anymore. Mm. And physicians, I was part of the problem. My constituents are still doing it. They're not telling the whole story.
So how do you two work together? I'm curious.
Ooh.
Doc Hodge's CBD line right here, those 25 milligrams he was talking about. This is a line that Doc Hodge formulates. So this is his CBD. And
now, is it legal to sell that?
Yeah,
without a prescription?
We can ship it to you.
Good.
Okay. Are you a supplier of his?
Absolutely. His product is exclusively available in my store. So people can only get it going through Holistic Hemp GA.
So that's guarantees then for people that they know they can be sure of what they're getting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you want to know the truth, ladies?
Yes.
Always.
Man, you looking at two guys that were in the trenches. And you know what I mean when I say the trenches?
Well, there is different.
Yeah, my mind's going everywhere. Like, okay, we're in that trench.
The dirty work.
We're
the dirty work, the tough work, the real work, the dirty work. Right. No applause, no spotlight.
Okay.
The trenches.
Because it's kind of like it's kind of like what you were referring to in the UK, how there's so much regulation that needs to be done, and there needs to be a standard, and it's hard when you set the standard like we do because there's so much junk out there that's not tested, and we got to make sure we have the best products for our patients. It has to be tested.
Yeah.
And then you're doing that at a time also, we've been doing this since 2014 where it wasn't always something that's, to jump into for the money. This is something these guys just recently started trying to get into for the money. They weren't the ones looking over their shoulder. They weren't the ones, meeting these patients out here and trying to help them and listening to their stories and their trauma and their backgrounds, and just that's the main thing is like people don't understand. And just like with Doc, how it's medicine for his pain, for his neck. And there's so many patients here that depend on that. So imagine if you got one person that they're dependent on, other people depend on Walgreens, they depend on CVS, imagine if those were shut down and you got one person for your whatever drug you take that you need, your Adderall, your benzos, whatever, So it's tough, it's definitely tough.
So this whole arena is a bit like the Wild West,
Absolutely.
And, it's like the internet. Someone has to come along and make some rules to regulate things so people know what they're getting.
So before regulation, I'm signing up patients. But guess what? Where are they going to get it? We don't have dispensaries yet.
Yeah.
We don't have retail. We don't have regulation. So I got patients immunocompromised, AIDS, right? Or they're doing chemo, immunocompromised, or they have sickle cell, immunocompromised, or they have chronic pain. I was catching colds all the time before I got my pain under control. It suppressed my immune system when there's no feel better, when you have chronic pain. I can't have CBD with any fungus on it. I can't have CBD with any mites or cannabis, any mites on it. I decided, hey, I got relief. I want to take this medication maybe for the next 4 decades of my life, So if I'm going to have 40 plus years, I got to make sure there's no heavy metals.
Yeah.
I don't want, I got to protect my brain. Heavy metals can turn to cancer. Heavy metals, aluminum, they're all correlated to Alzheimer's. I want to remember all the stuff that I'm doing, So Nick was a resource and a hero because I can't risk my MD, but somebody's got to help the patients.
Yeah.
Right.
So could people get it on Medicaid?
No,
they've got to pay for it.
It's just still a Schedule I drug. So everything cannabis is post-tax dollars. Even the business, they can't get loans. Mm-hmm. If you can get a loan, the interest rate is going to be like 40%, 30%, if you can get a little bit of money. So patients, caregivers, Nick, me, it's all post-tax dollars, and that creates a have and have not.
Yes.
And that's another problem with this emerging cannabis sector is that people with money will be able to treat themselves naturally. Yes. And the ones that have not, that have this system where you're stuck in the hamster wheel of pharma. And that ain't right.
That's going to be my next question to you. Is Big Pharma taking over the cannabis industry? I'm curious on your thoughts about that.
They're the only ones that have been allowed to move legally.
Oh,
So
fancy
we
that.
have we have 5 pharmaceutical cannabis drugs on the market. I just spoke of one, Sativex in the UK. We have Epidorlex here. We have Sesamid here. We have for the AIDS epidemic, we have a THC Marinol. That was the answer in the 80s and 90s to the AIDS epidemic here in the United States. People were dying of starvation and wasting. It wasn't just it just wasn't the AIDS that was killing them. It was horrific to watch. Before we had the 3 cocktails, it was horrific to see people starve to death. So pharmaceutical companies, because they knew our hands were tied, they started formulating based off our experiences. So yeah, they have decades of ahead of a leg up, and they know that it's the future. So they're all investing.
So the tobacco companies too.
They're investing into vapes. Look at the UK. I read that in England they want to stop cigarette smoking by 2024. Ban it. But they have patents for vaporizers. You guys seen the vapes?
Yeah. Oh,
and it's going to have different pods for nicotine and pods for cannabis, already patented by your government. You understand?
Yeah.
The rich will get richer.
Of course.
Yes.
Course. Where there's a buck to be made.
How can we rewrite that? We stick together.
So how do we?
Yeah.
Tell us, what can people do?
Man, question everything now. Question what makes you a customer for Big Pharma. Yeah. Question your activity, daily livings. Question what makes you a customer, your diet, your lack of sleep, your lack of exercise, and then understand where medications come from. What do they mostly mimic? They mimic plants. And
of course.
You start questioning when there's a dollar tied to it, you question the ethical and the credibility of it. And it's your health. So I think baby boomers are starting to get it. It's too late, even though they're the fastest consumers of cannabis. The fastest growing consumers of cannabis is baby boomers, is people on their way out, that are on 14, 15 medications. But Gen Z and our kids, they're not sold on Big Pharma. You can't even sell them on a vaccine. They seen it what it did to grandpa, and they still died. They seen grandma take chemo for 3 years and suffer and still die. I've seen it because that's my mom or dad, right? So you think the trust has been broken. People are trusting the plant now. And so Big Pharma better hurry up and, because that's the only way we're going to trust. That's the only way they're going to keep on making these trillions. You can't lock people up. Law enforcement's like, damn, urine drug screen companies are like, damn, we're losing millions every day. We can't test for urine. So they're finding ways to replace this income. And once they find plays and ways to replace the money they're already making, then they'll legalize. That's what's holding you up.
Yeah.
We all know.
Yeah. I was in Canada when they legalized, and I used to have to go into a dispensary for my sister because she had stage 4 cancer. Wow. And they couldn't prescribe it, and her oncologist wouldn't even say whether she thought it would be helpful. So she was left on her own, but she could go into a dispensary, with a card and to show that she had cancer, and she could buy it.
Hey, you're a soldier for taking care of her. You were doing it when it wasn't cool, and I hope your sister found comfort.
Well, she didn't actually, because it was too expensive for her to afford, and she couldn't find it. The thing that she bought one particular type, and when she went to another place to get the same brand, it wasn't. It wasn't. Yeah. It was different. It didn't have the same effects. So she very quickly turned her back on it. But I know the value of it. I believe in the value of it. But, we've only got about 3 minutes left. So I really want to give you both the opportunity to say whatever you think needs to be said. Nick?
No, it's kind of like what you were saying too. We just, between what me and Rasean have been doing, these past 6 or 7 years, it's wild because what you just said right there, where patients can't afford it, we do things too where we have layaway programs and nobody's doing that, where we're just helping patients out who can't afford it, So it's just, it's like I said, it's been a really amazing, incredible journey just to see where it started and, where it might finish, So I'll turn it over to Doc because I know he's got a lot to say.
No, that was a perfect sum up. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the opportunity for being on the show.
Well, we've still got a few more minutes.
Okay, cool. So we'll be on about,
Go for it.
Right yet.
So with just to expound on this hour is to hopefully we spark the curiosity with cannabis, full plant cannabidiol. We talked about different formulations. We talked about oil. We talked about buccal sublingual delivery. We talked about therapeutic applications, from cancer you just mentioned to, pediatrics, sickle cell, autism, PTSD. We talked about how, CBD can be a way to maybe get some of you listeners off of nicotine, as tobacco. Maybe some people are struggling today with opioids and benzos, or maybe amphetamines, or maybe someone's putting that dope in their arm. CBD can, explore CBD as, you might have spent 30, 40 grand and you stayed sober for just 2 weeks, just get a month of CBD, it might cost you $100, and that $100 did more than that 30 grand in treatment did for you, For my parents out there, definitely educate your kids because this sector is booming. The jobs that you are in currently won't exist for them. If they're not in blockchain, if they're not plant-based or plant-based meat, or not, writing code, what are they going to do? Cannabis and hemp is a beautiful industry. We need lawyers, we need doctors, we need nurses, we need architects. We need people to build greenhouses. We need welders. We need an understanding of hydroponics, aquaponics. So definitely, hey, Junior, there's this cannabis field. I hear a lot about it, but hey, this is really a booming sector. I heard they pay 30% more than other jobs. I heard it's about to be $100 billion market. Imagine you had 3% of that. Get an education in it. Maybe you might want to forget being a doctor. You might want to just get a degree in chemistry, and you can become a master grower. They can't, that plant can't turn into oil without you. That plant can't turn into an edible without you. And what are you doing? What do I got? I'm wearing a lab coat, and I'm looking at pesticide profiles and checking off temperatures, and I go home. And guess what? I'm making 150 grand at 22. I got profit sharing. The bigger the yield of these harvests, I get a percentage of that. So if the kids aren't hearing it from you, it's too late, because the only kids that are hearing about the careers in cannabis are the kids of the owners. So when they transition, their empire is protected.
We've got 1 minute. I just want to quickly ask you, clearly people need to get educated. There are many myths and misconceptions out there. Where would you recommend people go to get the clear, truthful information?
Not
Is
YouTube.
there a source?
Yeah, evidence-based medicine, Medline. Review Medline, Medscape, any article that's evidence-based. That reduces all types of bias, and bias comes in all types of form. I try to speak without bias, but you guys know I'm a user. I'm a chronic pain. So I'm going to be a little more of an advocate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rasean eats, sleeps, and breathes it.
So you have to
We're going to have to
understand.
close it down now, I'm afraid, because they're going to start playing us out.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your
Very nice meeting you guys.
Peace
and
and
your
love,
hard
y'all.
work in educating, and this was wonderful. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank
guys.
you so much.
I appreciate
It's so good to have your points of
Yes.
view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peace.
Dr. Rasean Hodge, Nick Mccauley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Grateful for the opportunity. Y'all have a rest of the great week. Okay.
We will. Same to y'all. Take care.
Okay. Well, that's it for Crack the Podcast for this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time and at the same time. So we look forward to being with you again. Till then, it's goodbye from me, Sandie Sedgbeer.
And me, Rebecca Schaper.
And don't forget, there is a crack in everything. It's where the light gets in.